Finally, let's talk quickly about San Francisco's utterly insane plan for racial reparations. So this idea has been proposed by an official city-approved reparations committee. It's saying that every black resident who's eligible should be given $5 million each. They should also have a guaranteed income of $97,000 for the next 250 years. They should be allowed to buy a home in San Francisco, one of the most expensive places on earth for property, for $1. And all of their debts should be wiped and they should never have to pay taxes again. Simply, it seems, for being black and meeting some kind of extra criteria. Paul, what do you make of this? Is this really a sensible way to go about addressing racial disparities?
Well, it was one of those stories that, you sometimes read a story which seems so kind of outlandish and far-fetched that you check the date of the newspaper to see if it's the 1st of April because you think, hold on a second, this must be a spoof. And I sort of read this and thought it must be a spoof, and then quickly realised that it wasn't. And it's clearly an absolutely crackpot idea. And I don't think people who peddle this sort of stuff know ultimately how divisive it is. I mean, they think it's kind of inclusive and unifying. And I tend to think that it's the complete opposite, really. And you just kind of think, where does it end? Since the dawn of humanity, history tells us that, groups have always pushed certain other groups off of their land. Now, it's not right, but it has always happened. And if you're talking about reparations where it's happened, or if you're talking about, historical crimes such as slavery, lots of other people's ancestors suffered historical crimes as well. Where does all of that stuff end? And it seems to me that it doesn't really end anywhere. And I'm not aware that there are any kind of slave owners in today's San Francisco, and I'm not sure that there's any kind of slaves in the way that you would normally consider slaves to be in today's San Francisco. So I'm not sure why it would be right to expect modern day residents of San Francisco to kind of cough up for this. And I think the argument that they're using is, well, as a result of what happened with historical slavery, black people today still suffer, and they suffer from more chance of ending up in poverty and poor healthcare and incarceration and that kind of thing. But actually, we could all use that argument when it comes to socioeconomic status. There are millions of people across the world today who are in their position in a sort of socioeconomic way because of their ancestors, because their ancestors grew up in poverty. I mean, my 4 grandparents grew up in the East End of London and really didn't have very much at all. And I don't doubt that, the socioeconomic status that applied to me when I was growing up was directly a result of my grandparents and their ancestors. But the idea that I would seek some sort of compensation for that now just seems to me to be bizarre. And I just think with this stuff, Fraser, it's almost like we're on a bit of a never-ending treadmill where some people are so kind of desperate to flaunt their progressive credentials that they're just constantly looking for the next thing. And once they achieve that, it's the next thing. And obviously, by definition, when you do that, the next thing becomes more and more radical and more extreme. And I think that's the kind of nonsense that we're getting into with this, to be blunt.
Ella, what do you think you'd make of this if you were, maybe white working class in San Francisco? Maybe you're an Asian American, Latino American, and all of a sudden you're having to pay for... we don't know how many people it could apply to. It might be just 20 people that they can connect to slaves. There are some suggestions that the criteria could be extremely broad as well. One recommendation is that anyone who has an ancestor who is incarcerated in the war on drugs could qualify. It's not yet been exactly decided, but it's just very divisive, isn't it?
It is very divisive. And if you're interested in, as I think people should be, trying to rectify, racism that still exists in America, or try to get better relations between different communities or whatever, this is not the way to do it. It's clearly not the way to do it. And there is, we know that a lot of the tension in terms of American sort of culture war politics is because of a sort of really cack-handed, almost kind of like bending over backwards to try and seem sort of woke or liberal approach from lots of sort of
and
political
racialist.
leaders. Yes, but I think there is an interest. We covered this at the Battle of Ideas Festival last year. There is the question of reparations. There's an interesting history in America, which is worth noting that they have paid out reparations to groups of people over the years. Lyndon B. Johnson made this kind of speech at one time saying, you don't hold a man back at the start for years and years and years, and then put him in a race with other people and say, go on, you've got a fair crack at the whip. So you can sort of be sympathetic to say, there is a conversation to be had here, but the solution is not reparations, not only because it's practically ridiculous, and there's no way that it could work in a sort of even on a basic kind of technical level, but also I think what Paul touched on is that one of the things that is most corrosive to politics at the moment is that it's a kind of a victim narrative in which people, rather than seeking to change the situation or the politics of the current moment, look to the past and try and find all the answers in the past. It's a very lazy way of looking at it. I mean, I could say, all my ancestors were murdered by Oliver Cromwell's got a statue in front of Parliament. Pay me. And
we're in danger of doing the Four Yorkshiremen routine here, aren't we?
Exactly. It can go on and on and on. And there is no future of a genuine progressive politics in that kind of outlook. So while this is a kind of a ridiculous thing, and let's wait and see. But I mean, a fair play to anyone who's black in San Francisco and gets millions of pounds. I take my hat off to you. Maybe you can donate to Spiked or something. But there is aside from this, I think there is a growing kind of discussion about the way in which we approach history and the way in which we approach the past, which is more often than not is pretty childish.